Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the Chaos Dwarfs, the Forge of the Chaos Dwarfs DLC, race DLC for Total War Warhammer free. We're going to get them in Realms of Chaos, we're going to get them in Immortal Empires, and we still lack plenty of details, but we at least have a release date, finally, after the Immortal Empires launch trailer pretty much confirmed that we're going to get Chaos Dwarfs. Now we finally have a release date. It's going to come as part of patch 3.0 on April 13th. Kind of an interesting choice, April 13th over there with the Chaos Dwarfs. But there's, of course, some information, but still we're lacking details that Creative Assembly is going to share with us in the near future before the Chaos Dwarfs do launch. Now, of course, there's a bunch of questions I do have, and three big questions I would ask Creative Assembly at this very moment with regards to Chaos Dwarfs. One, how is this going to affect the regular dwarves, the dwarves we already have in the game? Because they desperately need a rework, they desperately need improvements in their campaign, either a rework or improvements, or really both. Secondly, how is this going to work in Realms of Chaos? Because right now in Realms of Chaos, there's a lot of passive factions, and we've seen how adding a new race or remaking an already existing race, the Warriors of Chaos, how that can lead to some fairly boring campaigns, because the Warriors of Chaos are currently so far ahead of every other faction that it's not even funny. So if you add in a bunch of new legendary lords, a new race in Realms of Chaos and in Immortal Empires, that's the third question. How does this affect Immortal Empires? Are we going to have another situation like the Warriors of Chaos where we have a really great race, great rework, great design with the Warriors of Chaos at the moment, but their campaigns can be fairly dull? So how are they going to tackle these issues? How are they going to tackle the issues of Realms of Chaos? How are they going to tackle the issues of the dwarves that the dwarves currently have, and how are they going to tackle the issue of making a new race that's obviously going to have a lot of power, because that's generally what happens with DLC packs, but making it so that they have a fun and entertaining campaign all the same? Those are the three big questions I would have for Creative Assembly at the moment. Now, looking at the trailer, my impression of it really is steampunk dwarves, right? Lots of mechanized units, lots of cool stuff, greenskins as well, like hobgoblins and regular greenskins. And one of the shots of the trailer where they're assaulting the city, you see the greenskins in the front line. I was reminded of Mongol tactics, where they would send the captured people or people who are forced to join their empire as the front line, and then the real Mongol army would come in. It seems like that's possibly going to be the Chaos Dwarf game plan. It is interesting to see a race of dwarves where you obviously have the very high quality units of the dwarves. You see gunpowder units, you see cannons, you see mechanized units, but then coupled together with greenskin units. And it is going to be interesting to see how their army plays, how that's going to work out. It makes sense for a race that has very few numbers, because the Chaos Dwarfs don't have a lot of population in the lore. It's interesting to see how that's going to play out between the high quality units and the chaff that the greenskins and the hobgoblins represent, like the orcs, the black orcs in particular, because that's what the Chaos Dwarfs created. They created the black orcs, and then combine that with hobgoblins and, of course, the very high quality units. Now, we have some information from a blog post. Beyond the trailer, we have information. So we're going to get several legendary lords: Astrogoth Ironhand, the High Priest of Hashut, Drazov the Ashen, the Sorcerer Prophet of Hashut, and Zaytan the Black, Commander of the Tower of Zar. And I'm pretty certain we have pictures of every single one of them. We see them in the trailers, every single one of them. They are joined by the one and only legendary hobgoblin hero himself, Goblins Backstabber. The reason he's called the Backstabber is because he and the hobgoblins betrayed the greenskins during an attempted rebellion against the Chaos Dwarfs. Now, what's interesting, what they mention here, is that this maniacal group intend to construct the Great Drill of Hashut, which they will borrow through the very fabric of reality itself to conquer both the known world and perhaps also more. That sounds like a very Skaven campaign plan, to be quite honest. In fact, it might be a more Skaven campaign plan than what the Skaven currently have in their campaign and what they even had in Warhammer 2 in the Vortex campaign. Because creating a massive weapon of doom to destroy the world is very much a Skaven idea. In fact, it's exactly what the Skaven did during the end time, so maybe some inspiration taken from that. Now, releasing 3 Legendary Lords with an additional Legendary Hero is new for us and is the path we'll be following for future releases. Now, that's interesting, because when they say that, are they talking just about Legendary Heroes? Because Legendary Heroes are great, always fun to have, or are they talking about the fact that future DLC packs will also have 3 Legendary Lords as opposed to the 2 that quite a few of them, like the Lord packs in Warhammer 2, would have this rivalry between 2 Legendary Lords. Are we going to have 3 going forward? That would be a very interesting change for Creative Assembly. Now, these new heroes can be recruited and used by all Lords in a given pack, offering up a lot more playstyle flexibility than before. So people wanted more Legendary Heroes, they're giving us more Legendary Heroes. Now, what they're talking about here is about Astrogoth Ironhand. Now, he's interesting because he's kind of like wearing this medieval style mech suit or steampunk mech suit, kind of. The reason he's wearing that is because Chaos Dwarfs, they can use magic, they do use magic, but dwarves are naturally resistant to magic, so he's slowly, very slowly turning into stone. In fact, he might be petrified to a very significant degree, so you can't move without this. So he's the High Priest of Hashut, and once the most potent sorcerer to walk the plane of Zarduk. Astrogoth's waning powers are a result of prolonged petrification, leaving him bound to a mechanical device that grants him movement. He takes his place on the battlefield as an armor caster with a mix of spell lore, fire, and Hashut, able to cover plenty of ground at a respectable speed and hold his own up close against enemy combatants. Now, it's interesting to talk about the spell lore, because they're revealing, of course, quite a few details over here. The reason I think it's interesting to mention that is because Hashut is a minor chaos god of fire. So what kind of magic are we going to be talking about when it comes to the lore of Hashut? That's what I'm curious about. It's probably some kind of variation of fire magic. We'll see when it comes to that. Now, when it comes to him on the battlefield, what I'm really curious about is how is he going to play? Is he going to be a pure caster lord? It feels like he's going to have quite a bit of melee capability. Now, I do certainly hope he's better at it than many of the hybrid legendary lords that have both a melee skill tree and a magic tree. I do wonder if he's going to have the melee skill tree to be useful in melee, to be very useful in melee, or if he's going to be another situation like Katrin. Like the kind of caster lord you'd want, maybe someone like Warzag is a good example, someone like Teclis, of course, in different ways. Like Teclis is very much support, he runs around the battlefield casting spells. Warzag is stuck in with the boys, though obviously he lacks a lot of melee ability. I'm wondering what he's going to be like. I think someone like Warzag or Teclis or some other caster legendary lords can be very useful. I would hope they avoid the Katrin situation, because when it comes to caster lords, their magic, if they're lacking the melee skill tree, their magic needs to be so substantial to make up for that. Because one of the problems with not having a melee legendary lord is you're lacking a lot of melee ability, because you don't have that from the lord. That's one of the big problems of Katrin, and one of the big problems Katrin also has is her magic is not exactly great. So we'll see how he ends up going. I assume he's likely going to have a lot of power, but it does depend on what kind of decisions they make. Though I'm also wondering about the magic he's going to have, because the problem with hybrid legendary lords that have both magic and melee is you only have so many points, and you obviously want to spend some points in the red skill line for army benefits. You want to get blue skill lines, you want to get the melee skill line. That doesn't leave a lot of points for magic, and of course with legendary lords, you do have their special skill line as well. Maybe that special skill, maybe they can do some kind of hybrid skill line where his magic can be gained from other parts, so you don't have to just spend points directly in the magic skill line. Because if the choice comes down to it, I'd rather spend points in the melee skill line, a special skill line, and army skill line, as opposed to spending any points in the caster skill line, unless there's a significant amount of power gained from doing so. We'll see about that. He has a few more tricks up his metal sleeves, excelling in the Tower of Tsar by generating more conclave influence than any Dawi Tsar. Now, that's interesting because it seems we're going to have a lot of politicking involved when it comes to the Chaos Dwarfs in the Tower of Tsar, all of which makes him all the tougher to usurp. Now, Goblins Backstabber, he's a legendary hero. He betrayed the Greenskins, as I mentioned, and Lashing of Cunning granting him an enduring talent for survival with fixed scars crisscrossing his shoulders, which we're not really seeing on this model. He's focused on melee combat. This sneaky fellow works his way behind enemy lines. So I'm guessing a goblin big boss, far more powerful, because hobgoblins are more powerful, and this guy is going to be a special legendary lord. But he's going to have a giant wolf for faster movement. He's a force to be reckoned with. He's likely going to give, based on what's being said here, he's going to give you power for hobgoblin armies. His presence in army grants incredible powerful buffs and stat bonuses, and he has some extremely handy skills. He can keep ammunition flowing, interesting, so he's going to get ammunition. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of range power as the Chaos Dwarves. We saw cannons, we saw basically some version of Thunderers, or enable Vanguard deployment for all goblins with sneaky. So is that going to be a choice? And if stealth isn't your style, Git summons a band of hobgoblin cutthroats to command. Now, what is interesting to note here is the potential that can come from this. Because if the Chaos Dwarves end up having, like, let's assume like they're the regular dwarves. So they have their hardy warriors, solid front line, powerful ranged ability, but if you then suddenly add some kind of version of the nasty skulkers to that, as well as some meat shields in the form like some version of the greenskin boys, the orc boys, then you have a really powerful and effective army. Because you get the range prowess of dwarves combined with the melee combat ability of the nasty skulkers or some similar unit, combined with just chaff and the greenskins, regular greenskins. Okay. When he's nestled in among your army or breaking out from the pack, cover ground with a lesser generic lord, he's an invaluable asset. Now, campaign. Now, looking at the campaign, the economy and labor aspect over here on the screen, this reminds me very heavily of the slave mechanic that the Dark Elves used to have in Warhammer 2 that Creative Assembly changed. It seems some kind of variant of that, though it is going to have some different effects by the looks of it. The Chaos Dwarves need laborers. No, the Chaos Dwarves need slaves. And they can acquire them by besting their foes in battle or via the convoy mechanic, which we'll have more detail. So we'll see what that is all about in a couple of weeks. Before setting them to work in mining outposts to harvest raw materials. Now, that raw material aspect is going to be interesting, but and the outpost system. But let's talk about raw materials. So they're crucial for the dwarf empire building and necessity for constructing the more advanced building and structures. So you're going to be limited in how many structures you can construct. Beyond that, they can be converted into armaments that unlock the true strength of the dwarf's fiery military. So you get labor, you harvest materials, you construct the buildings, and you get powerful weapons and bolster the Chaos Dwarfs. I do hope that it's not going to be too much of a limiting factor, because if we end up in a situation where you have limitations on certain buildings, that's going to slow down your empire building. But we have to see how their empire building is actually going to look, because it's interesting they note outposts over here. So that leads me to believe that the Chaos Dwarves would not expand in a traditional manner by taking a significant amount of territory and building it up. Instead, they might have more limited territories like the Warriors Chaos have right now, or the Wood Elves have right now, which is very appropriate for the Dwarves, because especially the Chaos Dwarves with their very limited population. The Chaos Dwarves shouldn't be a faction that establishes massive settlements in every part of the map. They should be more like the Wood Elves or the Warriors of Chaos. In fact, even the regular dwarves should be like that, and they are like that in the lore. And it would be interesting to see a rework if they're going with a system of like some version of Dark Fortresses or Wood Elf settlements. If they're going with a similar system to that for the Chaos Dwarves, it would be interesting to ask the question if the regular dwarves could get some variant of that. Maybe not with this patch, but maybe down the line with some rework, they could use it. Though that would be a major change compared to how the dwarves currently play, and would take probably a lot of work. But we'll see regards to that. Then you have the Tower of Tsar, which can unlock various benefits. It seems like faction benefits, research, the ability to breach walls. Reading this, like you get the ability to breach walls when besieging immediately. Now, this is fairly significant, a great deal of power, because sieges are pretty miserable right now at the moment because there's no value in wasting time building siege, wasting turns building siege equipment. You're wasting time, you're giving the enemy time to react. So building rams and towers, waste of time. Now, it could be great if we had a way to build them instantly for money. That would make sieges more interesting, I'd say, because you would actually use towers and rams. No, at the moment, what you do is you attack a settlement instantly. And if you have range troops, you kill them beyond the walls. You use your range troops to annihilate them from beyond range. If you have a lot of melee power, you storm the gates. If you have the ability of destroying the walls, artillery or the Warriors of Chaos Showerstone ability, you use that. So that's what the Chaos Dwarfs do have, and I think this is going to make sieges more interesting because it gives you more entry points. We'll have to wait and see, and you can get more raw materials, and it feels like raw materials and armaments are going to be the main faction resources for the Chaos Dwarfs, beyond money, of course. Then you have the Tower of Tsar. It stands tall within the Chaos Dwarven capital of Zarnagorund. Political battleground for them. Now, what's interesting is, like, vying for seats within the tower will grant a diverse range of bonuses and rewards to the Chaos Dwarfs. Also presents an opportunity for some competition between the factions outside of warfare, thanks to multiplayer compatibility, adding a cooperative edge to the campaign experience in the form of districts. Districts can benefit the entire culture of Chaos Dwarfs, encouraging all to work together to enhance Zarnagorund for everyone's benefit. Now, this is interesting because it makes sense to have a system like this, and of course have the politicking. Creative Assembly has tried to do internal politicking for factions before. Rome 2 is the biggest example of that. It didn't work so well before, but we'll see how it is. I do hope it's not one of those annoying mechanics that slows you down, but we'll have to see. Or I hope it's not one of those annoying mechanics where you have to spend time and energy to just get the same benefits that other factions get far easier. That would be annoying as hell. We'll see about that, but I think it would be interesting if you could get benefits for cooperation, including potentially confederation, but you could also get benefits for taking out a rival, like faction-wide benefits, that kind of stuff. So you would have a reason to actually take out your rivals for some significant faction benefits as opposed to confederating them. That's just an idea. That's just a thought I have on this. Then they talk about battles. Well, they don't really talk about battles. They just talk about certain units. So you get Bull Centaurs, basically Dwarf Centaurs. Interesting. Chaos Dwarf Centaurs, basically mutated dwarves. Then other units as well. And finally, some pictures and more information. I guess we'll see what comes down the line when it comes to the Chaos Dwarfs, what kind of information they're going to share in the future. So, 3 Legendary Lords, a Legendary Hero that I imagine all of them can use. We saw them in the trailer, pretty damn certain we saw them in the trailer. We have the Warrior, we have the Priest, we have the Mage, effectively. There's certainly a great deal of interest in this. But I am concerned, admittedly, that this might end up like a Champions of Chaos DLC situation. Don't get me wrong, Champions of Chaos, great reward, great DLC, lots of values, great campaign mechanics. But I think I speak for a lot of people that what happened in both Realms of Chaos and Immortal Empires is a lot of those campaigns and the regular Warriors of Chaos campaigns ended up being pretty damn boring because they were so far ahead, and they still are so far ahead of virtually every other race that their campaigns end up feeling very boring. And I hope they avoid that. I'm particularly concerned about Realms of Chaos. And, you know, I do hope we do get some stuff for the regular dwarves. Those are my concerns. I'm very excited about this. I'm sure a lot of people are eager to see the Chaos Dwarfs in action. But I guess we'll see how Creative Assembly decides to implement them. Hopefully they have learned some lessons from the Champions of Chaos, but we have to wait and see. Costin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more as we get more and more information about them, including gameplay, as well as how more information on how their faction works. So a month from now, we're going to be playing the Chaos Dwarfs. Going to be a great time.